Hello everybody, welcome to Melchester Model Railway. At the beginning of this centennial year for Hornby, they decided to lay down the gauntlet with the announcement of an Era 1 locomotive from the pioneering age of railway history. It was to be none other than Stephenson's iconic locomotive Rocket. Join me on this archaic adventure and let's see how they got on. So here's the Rocket then in its centennial year presentation box, and as you can see it's a small box, so I think the model itself is going to be quite tiny. It's a locomotive and 3 coaches as I understand, and you can see it's got this rather nice stylized image of Rocket on the front. You can also notice that I've opted for the decoder fitted version. I understand that this model takes a 6-pin decoder and that there have been some issues with people having difficulty fitting their own, so I thought it would be wise to allow Hattons to fit this for me. The locomotive itself cost £162 and I paid an additional £23.50 to have it fitted with the decoder. So let's get on with opening it. So, at long last, I'm finally getting the chance to open Hornby's eagerly anticipated model of Rocket. Now, I haven't opened this yet, so just opening the lid, and wow, there we have this beautifully presented model in this presentation box. And on first glance, it looks like it's going to be a very interesting and highly detailed model, as well as an interesting historical document of a pioneering era locomotive. And just struck by how small these are. And on the inside lid there we've got some history of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. So I'm delving into the box now, and it's just thrilling to think that a major manufacturer like Hornby have taken on the challenges of producing a ready-to-run locomotive from Era 1. This locomotive dates from 1829. That's a good 8 years before the Victorian era even started. George IV was on the throne. The Prime Minister was the first Duke of Wellington. Composer Mendelssohn was touring the country, visiting Scotland, and Robert Peel had established the Metropolitan Police Act, the first bobbies going on patrol in London. And of course, on the 8th of October, George Stephenson's Rocket defeated John Ericsson's Locomotive Novelty in the Rainhill trials. Now, the locomotive and carriages come packaged in this black foam-like material, and it's a very snug fit. I can feel that there are some holes at the back that you can use your fingers to push through, so I'm just trying to ease the locomotive and the tender out very gingerly, because there's a lot of very fine detail on this model, and you can just sort of feel it snagging a little bit here and there in the foam. Eased it out, and there we are, got that out. Okay, just set that down there. So I'll just put that aside and let's take a closer look at this model. To give you some idea of just how small this model is, it measures only 9 centimetres from the front of the loco to the rear of the tender. The tender and loco are connected via a semi-permanent drawbar coupling of the older style that Hornby used to use before the advent of a more permanently screwed together coupling. What remains of the original Rocket is sadly a pale reflection of its original self, as it was much modified during its life before ending up in London's Science Museum and its subsequent transfer to the National Railway Museum. However, the wonderful replica Rocket, built in 1979 for the 150th anniversary of the Rainhill trials, gives us a feel for just how well Hornby have accomplished this miniature marvel. Robert Stephenson's rocket had a number of innovative design features that enabled it to be relatively strong and efficient. The first was the multi-tubed boiler, and we can see that the boiler on Hornby's model, with its wonderful wood cladding, has been done to perfection. Rocket cylinders were also at an angle for better transfer of power to the wheel, and again Hornby have replicated this perfectly. I particularly like the large metal-rimmed wooden driving wheels, which seem to have a clear genesis from the wagon wheel. The tall and elegant smokestack at the front, with its metal supports, all contribute to the elegance and novelty that this locomotive displays. The tender, too, in which would have been carried the coke to fire the locomotive, is also exquisitely detailed, with its barrel to carry the water. On the model, the barrel is where the DCC decoder is kept. The separately fitted details on this model are very delicate, but capture the look of the prototype very well, such as all the copper tubing, which you can see particularly on this side of the locomotive. And as you can see, the cherry on the cake really does come in the form of these two Georgian gentlemen to fire and drive the locomotive. Who knows, perhaps it is even the Stephensons themselves. So let's turn our attention to the carriages. We've got 3 different carriages in the Liverpool and Manchester livery. Each one has its own name. We've got Globe, Renown and Wellington. So let's take out Globe. And again, these are very delicate. Gosh, now this packaging is possibly not the best sort of packaging, because it's very easy to snag the fine detail on the foam, especially with frequent use. Well, it seems to have gotten out okay. There's Globe. So the next carriage, that's going to be Renown. There we are. It's Renown. And finally, we've got Wellington. There we are. So these 3 carriages are fine examples of the early carriage used by the Liverpool and Manchester Railway Company. Each carriage is essentially 3 stagecoach bodies sewn together. Here you can see a replica on display at the National Railway Museum. Here you can see that I've coupled all 3 coaches together using Hornby's unique but very fiddly coupling system that they've devised for this train pack. No expense seems to have been spared on the modelling of these highly detailed coaches, and the livery and printing is very crisply applied. You can see the finely modelled footplates attached to the underframes, which also feature cutaway sections. The lettering on the sides is very crisp and clear, reading Liverpool Manchester Railway Company, with the name of the carriage in the middle compartment. On the roof there are finely applied handrails making up the luggage area, and a rudimentary seat at the end of the carriage for the guard, who was, I believe, able to apply a primitive form of handbrake, rocket not being fitted with any brakes. Perhaps this may account for the fatality which occurred on the line's official opening day in 1830, when the MP for Liverpool fell onto the tracks and was struck by rocket and sadly killed. This early print, published in 1831, shows the same first-class carriages, with the luggage and the guard atop the train. It must have been quite a frightening experience. Let's head over to platform 5 now at Melchester, where Rocket is about to depart for her first run on the layout. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing Rocket running on the layout. It really is a delightful model, and Hornby have certainly pulled out all the stops to get this model looking just right. It's deserving of a place on any layout, and even if you don't have a layout, it could certainly take pride of place in any presentation cabinet. We already have models of such iconic locomotives like Flying Scotsman and Mallard, so it's quite right that Rocket should now join them. Now, because this is such a small and delicate model, it wasn't without its issues, and it's only fair I mention some of them here. The main one being that unless you have a billiard table flat layout, Rocket struggles with even the slightest variation in level, resulting in wheel slip. This is probably down to the lightness of the locomotive, which certainly doesn't do anything to aid traction. Often a little nudge was needed to help it again on its way. The other issue that I had is that due to the very tall smokestack of Rocket, I could only run it on 1 out of 3 running lines on my layout, due to it not being able to pass beneath this footbridge on the main lines. As you can see here next to a standard locomotive, it just misses being able to pass beneath this footbridge by a few millimetres. So I'd either have to reduce the smokestack or try and raise the level of the footbridge, which would not be an easy task. I also had an issue with the front pair of tender wheels not making full contact with the rails, as you can see in this clip. This may be due to a lack of weight or the connecting wires pushing the front of the tender upwards. Last but by no means least is the coupling method that Hornby have deployed. While these representations of a fairly primitive chain coupling look really good, especially if you intend the model for display purposes only, the fine and fragile couplings are very hard to handle, making coupling everything together a fairly difficult and irksome task. I should imagine that these couplings are going to be very easy to lose or break if you're not very careful. So, to summarise then, it's great that a major manufacturer like Hornby of ready-to-run trains has ventured into an era of railway history that is usually the preserve of scratch builders by producing this super detailed model. Let's hope that it will spark interest in this pioneering age of steam, which is very much underrepresented at the moment. If you want to find out more about modelling this period, I can heartily recommend the excellent book which was published last year, Early Railways, A Guide for the Modeller by Peter Chatham and Stephen Weston, which features the work of Mike Sharman, a pioneer modeller of early railways, as well as fascinating information on the infrastructure, locos, carriages, wagons, layouts and models for the era. Let's hope that Hornby produce further Era 1 locomotives in the future. I'd love to see them release a model of Lion, another Liverpool and Manchester loco, which would no doubt be as popular as Rocket, and owing to its 042 wheel arrangement, is perhaps more likely to produce a more powerful and reliable model. My model of Rocket obviously isn't going to be a stalwart of my 1950s Southern Railway Southern Region layout, but I couldn't resist buying it, and I love having it, and it will certainly be run on special occasions, but it's most likely to be put on display in the Melchester Museum of Antiquities and Curios, as it really is a beauty to behold in its own right. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and bye for now.